Now to the murder case against Casey Anthony. A memorial service is being planned for her daughter Kaylee, while Casey's lawyers are fighting to get her trial moved out of town. NBC's Kerry Sanders has more.
They have gone on record numerous times.
Casey Anthony's lawyers argue even before a trial, the consensus in Orlando is the 22-year-old murdered her daughter Kaylee. It is a rare case when angry neighbors bang on the front door, calling the accused a murderer. But the defense team says the swirl of emotion and nonstop media attention is not unprecedented. Defense attorney Linda Kinney-Bodden has looked back more than 50 years to find another case. The murder trial of Sam Shepard.
The Fugitive.
It was the basis for the 60s TV show and later the movie, The Fugitive.
Brown hair, brown eyes, beards, anyone like that around?
Every time I look in the mirror, pal.
You either remember David Jansen or Harrison Ford, and that the person who seemed to be so guilty, that the locals had made this person so guilty, he was so hated, he ran from the law, turns out he was innocent.
And in this case?
In this case, we believe our client is innocent.
Richard, do you want to get shot?
In the movie, the Sam Shepard character is convicted of a murder because no one believes his story, that his wife was killed by a one-armed man. Casey's lawyers say they face a similar problem. In real life, it took a Supreme Court decision to overturn Shepard's conviction.
It may be necessary once again to ask for a change of venue.
His lawyer, F. Lee Bailey, was vilified.
I've been attacked personally.
Much the way Kinney-Bodden says defense attorney Jose Baez has faced personal attacks in this case.
Well, I think Casey is being portrayed in a public persona as being an Osama bin Laden, and Jose Baez has the public persona of being Hitler. They're both hated.
For today, Kerry Sanders, NBC News, Orlando.
And Dan Abers is NBC's chief legal analyst. Dan, good morning.
Morning, Natalie.
Both of the defense attorneys were here with Meredith earlier, and as you heard, they made that case again, comparing Casey Anthony to Dr. Sam Shepard. And it's an interesting point that they bring up, the presumption of innocence. With all the media exposure that this case has brought, has the presumption of innocence been lost here?
Well, first, let's be careful, because just about every high-profile defendant likes to compare themselves to Sam Shepard. So that's important. It's like a president comparing yourself to Kennedy or Lincoln or Washington, etc. The bottom line is it's always the comparison that's made. With that said, this is not a frivolous motion to say we need to move this out of the area, because there's been so much local attention. With that said, the standard is not, has there been a lot of attention on the case? The standard is, can we find a fair jury? Now, there's no question it'll be harder to find a fair and objective jury because of all the attention, but that's not the question. The question isn't, is it going to be harder? The question is, basically, is it going to be impossible? And that's the question the judge is ultimately going to have to decide.
Let's talk about evidence in the case, and the defense team said they're re-examining some of the forensic evidence. Now, how can the defense use the forensic evidence and hopefully make their case, as they say, versus the circumstantial evidence, which we know is huge, apparently?
They want to find evidence that points to someone else. They would love to find, for example, on the duct tape.
They're looking for the one-armed man, the Dr. Sam Shepard.
But here they're even looking for a fraction of a fingerprint on the duct tape. They're looking for a hair that belongs to someone else. They're looking for anything that points away from the mom. And remember that when you're talking about the physical evidence here, even if the mom's hair, let's say, is found on the body, that doesn't necessarily prove that she was responsible, because she's the mom. And she would have been hugging her child, etc. The question is going to be finding evidence in incriminating places. Finding evidence, for example, that was on the body that can be linked back to the home.
Meanwhile, the legal team has also gone back to the crime scene. I mean, this is a crime scene that was carefully combed over, I imagine, by police. So by going back a few times, what more are they looking for to build their case?
They want to find evidence that maybe someone else was there. Anything. Footprints. You name it. And look, as we know, just because the police were there, it's a big crime scene, as you point out, it doesn't mean that there's not something else to find there. And what they're looking for is anything that will point in another direction.
Florida is very interesting because they have the sunshine laws. So essentially, everything that is discovered or in the discovery process is released to the media that very same day. How will that affect how the defense then takes and makes their argument in court.
Yeah, well, that's part of what the defense is using to say that the prospective jury pool has been so polluted. Mm-hmm. They're saying, look, everyone knows all the evidence in this case already. How can they be fair? Well, part of the answer to that is think about the O.J. Simpson civil case, all right? Mm-hmm. So the criminal case has just happened in L.A., and now they're trying to find a jury for the civil case in Santa Monica. How do you do it? Well, I can tell you from having covered that jury selection process that they ask a lot of questions. They try to make sure people haven't seen too much, although in the O.J. Simpson case, they certainly knew. They knew the name Mark Furman. They knew some of the evidence, but they hadn't developed opinions about the case, and they're going to have to do the same thing here.
What about, in this case, they're trying to get it moved out of Orlando? Do you think that that may actually
It could happen. I mean, this is one of those unique cases where there has been an enormous amount of attention in the Orlando area, probably more than surrounding areas in Florida. So it's not a frivolous motion. It's always hard to get a trial moved. But I think that this is one where a judge is going to seriously consider it.
All right. Dan Abrams, thanks. Always great to talk.